Malik Johnson awoke 15 minutes before the alarm clock rang, as it did almost every morning. The dim light of the early summer morning seeped through the cheap blinds, streaking the cracked bedroom wall. He turned his head and looked at his wife, Kimberly. She lay turned away from him, her shoulders subtly rising and falling in time with his breathing. Once the mere sight of those shoulders, that smooth, dark skin, had thrilled him. Now he looked at her with a dull indifference, as if she were a broken thing that should have been thrown away long ago. But he kept putting it off because he couldn't decide if it was worth the time. The alarm clock announced 4:30 in the morning with a sharp, annoying sound. Malik turned it off in one motion, not wanting to hear a second of unnecessary noise. Kimberly moved, but didn't wake up. She never woke up with him. He got out of bed, trying not to squeak the springs, though he wasn't sure why he even cared about her sleep. The bathroom greeted him with the familiar smell of dampness and cheap soap. Malik turned on the light, which instantly brought out from the darkness his reflection in the cracked mirror. The dark circles under his eyes made him look older than 35. His thin face, with deep wrinkles running between his eyebrows and around his mouth, looked tired even after sleep. He ran his palm over the short stubble, deciding whether to spend time shaving. He decided he shouldn't. It was Thursday. He could shave on Friday before the weekend. The shower was running intermittently, like everything else in this house on the outskirts of Muscatine, the small Iowa town where the Johnsons were in their 7th year. Malik stood under the intermittent jets of barely warm water, listening to the groans and creaks of the old pipes. He was trying to wash away not only the sweat and grime of yesterday, but also the heavy, oppressive feeling that had haunted him for the past months. Or had it been years? He couldn't remember the last time he'd woken up without that feeling. After his shower, Malik dressed in his work clothes. Worn jeans, a worn t-shirt, a sweatshirt with frayed cuffs. In the small kitchen, he put a kettle on the stove and pulled a jar of instant coffee from the cupboard. A spoonful, 2 spoonfuls, maybe make it 3 today? It was going to be a hard day. He and his crew were finishing the foundations of a new supermarket, and the foreman had promised to load them to the brim. Through the kitchen window, he could see the backyard of his neighbor, Mr. Brooks, the only white man on the block who regarded Malik with undisguised suspicion. Malik never gave him a reason to, always said hello, but the neighbor's gaze still made him uncomfortable. Malik turned away from the window and returned to his coffee. On the table were the utility bills that Kimberly had defiantly laid out the day before, demanding that he finally do something about it. Malik picked up the top envelope, a notice of electricity arrears. The amount was underlined in red marker, $324. He folded the bills and tucked them into his jacket pocket. Maybe it would be possible to negotiate an installment plan. Maybe there would be more hours today. Maybe Kimberly would finally get a job. Malik grinned at his own thoughts. Kimberly hadn't worked in over a year, ever since she'd been fired from the supermarket for tardiness and inappropriate behavior with customers, as the manager had delicately put it. At the time, she had screamed that the job was beneath her dignity, that she would find something better. But time passed and there was no new job. After finishing his coffee, Malik quietly left the house and got into his old Ford Focus, another reminder of better times. The car had once been a source of pride. Now it needed repairs he couldn't afford. The engine started on the second try, and Malik turned on the radio to drown out his anxious thoughts. The voice of the night DJ was saying that the summer was going to be hot, that a drought was expected. Malik didn't care. He'd been through years of drought in his life. It was a 20-minute drive to the construction site. At that time, the town was asleep and the roads were empty, allowing Malik to enjoy rare moments of solitude and silence. He drove past neat houses with trimmed lawns, past closed stores and cafes. In the center of town were the administration buildings and the bank, which he had always tried to stay away from. The loan he had taken out to buy the house had long ago become an impossible burden. The construction site was on the outskirts of Muscatine, near the exit to the interstate highway. The new supermarket would attract shoppers from neighboring towns and thus generate profits for the owners and taxes for the city. To Malik and his co-workers, it brought only another opportunity to bend their backs for minimum wage. Malik parked next to the temporary fence and headed toward the trailer that served as the foreman's office. Several workers were already gathered there, waiting for the assignment of tasks. Among them was Leroy Davis, Malik's best friend. Leroy noticed Malik and nodded, not smiling. They had met 3 years ago when they worked together on the construction of an apartment complex in a neighboring county. A shared past, similar problems, and a tacit understanding of life's difficulties bound them more tightly than conversation and revelation could. "Good morning," Leroy said, handing Malik a paper cup of coffee from a thermos. "You look lousy." "Thank you." Malik accepted the coffee, ignoring the remark about his appearance. "How's Laisha?" Laisha was Leroy's wife, a nurse at the local clinic. She and Leroy had been married for 10 years, raising 2 children, and seemed as happy as could be under their circumstances. "It's fine," Leroy replied. "Yesterday I came home after dark. They had some kind of emergency in the department. 2 of the nurses quit, and they haven't found replacements." Malik nodded. Talking about other people's welfare was easier than talking about his own problems. The foreman, a stocky man with a face perpetually red from heat or alcohol, came out of the trailer with a clipboard in his hands. "So listen here," he began without greeting. "Today we finish pouring the eastern part. Johnson Davis, you and your crew set the formwork. We've got until lunchtime, and the rest of you are on the rebar." Malik nodded again, finishing his coffee. The day promised to be long and grueling. The work began with hard physical labor. They hauled planks for the formwork, fitting them to size, fixing them in place. The sun was rising above the horizon, mercilessly heating the construction site. By 9 o'clock in the morning, Malik's back was aching, and his shirt was sticking to his body with sweat. "You know, I'm thinking of leaving," Leroy said suddenly when they stopped for a moment to catch their breath. "Where to?" Malik asked, though he didn't care. "Chicago maybe, or Detroit. They say the construction is going strong there and the pay is better. Laisha could get a job at any hospital." Malik looked at his friend with disbelief. "And leave home? The neighbors? A school for the kids?" Leroy shrugged his shoulders. "What's keeping us here? The house takes more than it gives. Neighbors? You told me about Brooks yourself. And the school? I want my kids to have a chance. A real chance, you know?" Malik understood. He'd once dreamed of the same thing, of breaking out of the cycle of poverty, of giving something better to his family. But the years had quenched that hunger for dreams, replacing it with the dull ache of humility. "And you?" Leroy asked. "You and Kimberly never thought of leaving?" Malik hummed. "All Kimberly does is think, except she doesn't want to do anything." He was quiet for a moment, and then he added, "She nags me every single day. She doesn't have enough money, she doesn't pay enough attention, her house isn't right, her car is old. And what about herself? Lying on the couch, watching her soap operas, drinking wine and complaining." Leroy looked at his friend with sympathy, but said nothing. He knew that the situation in Malik's family was getting worse every month, but he did not interfere with advice. Men rarely talk about such things directly. The work continued through the afternoon without a break. When the signal sounded, Malik was so exhausted he could barely speak. He and Leroy sat down in the shade of the temporary shelter, pulled out their sandwiches and thermoses of water. "This is shit, not life," Malik said suddenly, looking at his blistered hands. "I work like hell, and what do I have? A house that's falling apart, a wife who despises me, bills I can't pay, and no way out." Leroy listened in silence, letting his friend talk. "You know, sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if Kimberly and I hadn't gotten married. If I hadn't bought into her promises and her sweet talk. Maybe I'd be somewhere. Not here." "You loved her," Leroy reminded him. Malik grinned bitterly. "I did. And she loved the idea of family, of home, of respect among neighbors. You know, I've noticed she's been leaving the house a lot. She says it's to see her friends, but..." He paused, not wanting to say his suspicions out loud. "Do you think..." "I don't think anything," Malik cut him off. "I'm just tired of all this." After lunch, the work resumed with renewed vigor. The foreman rushed everyone, promising a bonus if they finished before the deadline. Malik did not believe in the bonus, but he worked to the limit. Not for money, but not to think, so that the physical pain drowned out the mental pain. In the evening, when the sun was already slipping toward sunset, Malik struggled to get to the car. His whole body ached, and new calluses appeared on his palms, despite the gloves. He sat behind the wheel and closed his eyes for a moment, imagining that he didn't have to go home, that he could just go somewhere far away, where no one knew him. Leroy knocked on the window, making Malik flinch. "Hey, are you okay?" Malik nodded, rolling down the window. "Yeah, just thinking. What do you want?" "Laisha made too much food for dinner. Why don't you come over to our place? We'll have dinner, have a beer." Malik thought about the empty fridge at home, the inevitable fight with Kimberly, the bills waiting to be paid. The temptation was great. Thanks, but some other time. I need to take care of something at home. Leroy nodded understandingly and patted his friend on the shoulder. As you wish. The offer still stands. Call me if you change your mind. Malik started the car and drove out of the parking lot. The drive home seemed endless, even though it was only 6 o'clock in the evening. When he stopped at a stoplight, he noticed a billboard advertising a mortgage company. Your dream home is closer than you think. Malik grinned. Their home with Kimberly had once been a dream too, but now it had turned into a nightmare. As they approached the house, Malik noticed an unfamiliar car parked 2 houses away from his own. A dark blue Chevy, not new, but in good condition. He didn't pay much attention to it. The neighbors often had visitors. The house greeted him with an unaccustomed silence. Kimberly usually had the TV on full volume, as if trying to fill the void in her life with the noise of reality shows and soap operas. Tonight, the house was quiet. Kimberly? Malik called out as he entered the living room. No one answered. He walked into the kitchen empty. There were dirty dishes in the sink, an empty wine glass, and an open bottle on the table. Malik picked up the bottle, an expensive red wine, which he certainly hadn't bought. Next to it lay a crumpled napkin with a lipstick imprint. A strange premonition swept over Malik. He walked slowly upstairs, listening to the creak of the old steps beneath his feet. The door to the bedroom was ajar, and muffled voices and laughter could be heard coming from behind it. Malik pushed the door open and froze on the threshold. On their bed, on the crumpled sheets, Kimberly sat wrapped in a sheet. Beside her, wearing only boxers, stood a man, tall, slender, with a tattoo wrapped around his right shoulder. He turned around when he heard the door creak open, and Malik recognized him. DeAndre Parker, the bartender at the Blue Moon, a popular bar in downtown Muscatine. For a few seconds, all three were silent, like actors in a silent scene of a mediocre play. Then Kimberly laughed nervously, pulling the sheet higher. Malik, you're early tonight, she said with contrived nonchalance, as if he'd caught her watching a forbidden movie rather than in bed with another man. DeAndre frantically pulled on his jeans, avoiding meeting Malik's gaze. Look, brother, it's not what you think, he began, but faltered when he saw the look on Malik's face. Out, Malik said quietly, almost in a whisper. Out of my house. DeAndre, already fully dressed, grabbed his jacket and cell phone. Look, let's talk like adults. Out, yelled Malik, taking a step toward him. Get out before I smash you against the wall. DeAndre raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture and walked quickly past Malik, trying not to hit him with his shoulder. Downstairs, the front door slammed. Kimberly sat on the bed, clutching the sheet tightly in her hands. There was not shame in her eyes, but some strange mixture of irritation and superiority. What have you accomplished? She asked when DeAndre's footsteps died away. Making a scene, scaring a man. Malik stared at her, not believing his ears. I made a scene? Me? You fucked the bartender in our bed and I made a scene? Kimberly pressed her lips together. What am I supposed to do? You're at work all day. You come home dirty and tired, and all you can do is complain about life. Am I supposed to grow old next to you in this dump? Malik clenched his fists, feeling a wave of rage rising inside. I'm working to provide for us. Both of us. This house, your food, your goddamn wine. I pay for all of it. And you don't even try to get a job. Kimberly got out of bed, holding the sheet with one hand. Why do I have to look for a job? Some lousy position for a pittance? So I can come home a wreck like you? No, thank you. I deserve better than that. And if you can't give it to me, I'll find someone who can. Malik felt something tearing inside of him. The love he had once felt for this woman had finally died, leaving behind only bitterness and contempt. So this is the price you put on your head? Fucking the bartender for a drink and some handouts? Kimberly's eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't you dare talk to me like that. At least DeAndre notices me, listens to me. And yes, buys me things you can't afford. Get out, Malik said, realizing that the conversation was pointless. Pack your things and get out of my house. Kimberly laughed, but there was no mirth in her laughter. Your house? This wreck? Do you seriously think I'm just going to leave? After all the years I've wasted on you? Wasted? Malik interjected. What have you wasted besides my money and my nerves? You sat at home while I worked, doing nothing useful. I was your wife! Kimberly screamed. I was there for you when you got fired from your last job. I put up with your complaints, your whining about how unfair everything was. Malik shook his head. Pack your things. You have an hour. Then I'll throw whatever's left outside. He turned to leave, but Kimberly grabbed his arm. You can't kick me out. This is my house too. It's in my name, Malik reminded her. And I've always paid for it. So yes, I can kick you out. He shook off her hand and headed for the door, but Kimberly suddenly rushed to the bedside table and grabbed a knife. Malik didn't immediately realize it was his own folding knife that he kept for minor repairs. You're not kicking me out of here, Kimberly hissed, holding the knife out in front of her. This is my home as much as it is yours. Malik froze, unable to believe his eyes. The woman he'd lived with for 10 years was standing in front of him, knife in hand, ready to strike. It was so surreal that he could barely contain a nervous laugh. Are you going to kill me? He asked, taking a step back. Think about it, Kimberly. This isn't a movie. This is real life. Murder is prison. Shut up, she yelled, taking a step toward him. Just shut up and listen. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this calmly. You're not going to kick me out. We're going to figure out how to move on. And if I want to see DeAndre, you won't interfere. Malik shook his head, feeling the despair and anger building up inside. Are you out of your mind? You want me to let you fuck another man under my roof? You're out of your mind. Kimberly lunged at him with a knife. Malik barely had time to deflect, and the blade only grazed his arm lightly. He grabbed Kimberly's wrist, trying to pull the knife away, but she clung to him with a deadly grip. They struggled, colliding with furniture, knocking over a lamp and throwing things around. At one point, Malik lost his balance and fell, dragging Kimberly with him. They tumbled across the floor, hands clasped together. Stop! Malik breathed out as Kimberly managed to pull her knife hand out and bring it back in. What are you doing? But Kimberly didn't hear him. Her eyes were filled with the rage that had been building up inside her for years, fueled by the frustration of the life she'd led. She struck, and Malik felt a sharp pain in his side. He tried to fight back, but his strength was fading with each passing second. Black spots swam before his eyes, and he realized he was losing consciousness. The last thing he saw was Kimberly's silhouette rising from the floor. She took one last look at him, and throwing on some clothes, left the room. Then darkness fell. Malik awoke to the sound of sirens. Some men were bustling around, one of them leaning over him, shining a flashlight into his eyes. Sir, can you hear me? Blink if you can. Malik blinked with difficulty, feeling the pain throbbing in his side, tearing him from the inside out. Okay, said the man who turned out to be a paramedic. We're taking you to the hospital. You've lost a lot of blood. Malik wanted to say something, but couldn't. He was lifted onto a stretcher and carried down the stairs. At the front door stood Mr. Brooks, the same neighbor who always looked at Malik with suspicion. I heard shouting and noise, he said to someone, presumably a policeman. I didn't want to interfere at first, but then it got quiet, and it seemed strange. I knocked. No one answered. The door was unlocked. Malik closed his eyes. So Brooks was the one who found him and called an ambulance. How ironic. Consciousness began to slip away again, and Malik slipped into oblivion, now deeper and calmer. He regained consciousness in the hospital. There were instruments beeping around him, recording his vital signs. The bright light of the hospital lamp shone into Malik's eyes, making him squint every time he tried to look around. It had been 2 days since he had been brought to the hospital with 8 stab wounds. The doctors called him lucky. None of the stabs had hit vital organs, though the blood loss had been significant. Malik lay in the hospital bed, feeling a dull, aching pain throughout his body. Painkillers dulled the sharp flashes, but could not completely remove the discomfort. He tried to lie still, remembering the events of that evening. The memories came in fragments. Kimberly in the sheet, DeAndre hastily pulling on his jeans, the glint of the blade in his wife's hand, the sharp pain piercing his body again and again. The door to the room opened and 2 men entered. The first was tall, angular, with a serious, attentive look. He was dressed in a dark gray suit, a little wrinkled, as if its owner had slept in it. The other was shorter, fleshier, with a short haircut and neatly trimmed beard. Both were dark-skinned and held themselves with the confidence of men accustomed to authority. Mr. Johnson? The tall one addressed me. I'm Detective Quentin Holloway, and this is my partner, Detective Roger Tuller. We're with the Muscatine Police Department. If you're feeling well enough, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Malik nodded weakly, trying not to make any sudden movements. Water? Tuller asked, pointing to a glass with a tube on the bedside table. Yes, thank you, Malik replied hoarsely. Tuller brought the glass to Malik's lips, and he took a few eager sips. The cold water eased the dryness in his throat a little. Mr. Johnson, Holloway began, taking a seat in the chair beside the bed. I know this isn't easy for you, but we need to get to the bottom of what happened. Can you tell me what happened on the evening of June 8th? Malik took a deep breath, writhing in pain, and began to speak. I came home from work around 6 in the evening. The house was quiet, which surprised me. Usually my wife is watching TV. When I went up to the bedroom, he paused, gathering his strength. I found my wife in bed with another man. Holloway nodded, making notes in a small notebook. Can you tell me the man's name? Malik hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The thought flashed quickly but clearly. Don't tell them. He knew he should tell the police, but something inside, dark, evil, hungry for retribution, made him lie. No, I'd never seen him before. Tall, slender guy with a tattoo on his shoulder. She'd shoot him away as soon as I walked in. I see, Holloway said, looking at Malik carefully. What happened next? We had a fight. I was furious. I told her to get out of my house. She refused. She screamed that she owned it too. Then, Malik paused again. Then she grabbed a knife. My folding knife that I keep in my nightstand for small repairs. I didn't take it seriously. I thought she was just trying to scare me, but she came at me. I tried to defend myself, but she was like crazy. How many blows did she throw? Tuller asked. I didn't count, Malik answered. A lot. 8, the doctor said. I lost consciousness. I woke up when the neighbor had already called an ambulance. Holloway nodded, continuing to take notes. Your wife, Kimberly Johnson, where did she go after the attack? Malik shook his head. I don't know. I was unconscious. When was the last time you spoke to her? Tuller asked. The night before she attacked me. I never saw her again. The detectives looked at each other. Mr. Johnson, Holloway began in a serious tone. We've been looking for your wife since the accident, but so far, no luck. Her credit cards have not been used. Her cell phone is turned off. Do you have any idea where she might be hiding? Malik hesitated. He guessed that Kimberly was probably at DeAndre's, but decided not to share that suspicion. A plan was already forming in his head, vague but insistent. Perhaps at her friend, Shaniqua Brown's. They're close. Malik lied. Shaniqua was indeed Kimberly's friend, but they hadn't spoken in years after a fight over some petty matter. Do you have an address for Miss Brown? Tuller asked, pulling out his cell phone. No, just know she lives somewhere on the north side of town. Holloway looked at Malik with slight suspicion. Mr. Johnson, are you sure you've told us everything? Anything, even the smallest detail, could help us find your wife. It's in her best interest, too, since the longer she hides, the more serious the charges will be. Malik met the detective's gaze, trying to look sincere. I've told you everything I know. If I could help find her, I would. She almost killed me, detective. Holloway stared at Malik for a few more seconds, then nodded. Good. We'll check every possible place she could be hiding. He pulled a business card out of his pocket and placed it on the nightstand. If you think of anything important or if she contacts you, call immediately. My work and cell numbers are here. Of course, Malik agreed. And one more question, Holloway said, getting up. Do you know a man named DeAndre Parker? He works as a bartender at the Blue Moon Bar. Malik felt his heart skip a beat, but kept his expression calm. DeAndre Parker? No, I don't recall that. Why? Just checking all the connections, Holloway replied. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Johnson. Feel better. We'll visit you again. The detectives left, and Malik was alone in the silence of the hospital room. The door to the room opened again, and a nurse entered, a short, thin woman with kind eyes and a tired face. It's time for your medication, Mr. Johnson, she said, checking the IV. How are you feeling? I've been better, Malik replied, trying to smile. Is that your friend out there in the hallway? The nurse asked. A tall man, waiting since this morning. He says you're colleagues. Malik thought. It must be Leroy. It's nice to have a friend come to check on him. Yeah, that's my friend. Can I let him in? The nurse nodded, finishing the IV. Sure, but not for long. You need to rest. She left, and a minute later, Leroy entered the room. He looked worried, a mixture of concern and anger on his face. Dude, what the hell? He started without preamble. I just found out last night. Are you okay? Malik grinned weakly. Still breathing, as you can see. Leroy sat down in the chair next to the bed, the same one where Detective Holloway had recently sat. I'm told you were attacked by Kimberly. Is that true? Malik nodded, and Leroy cursed under his breath. What happened? Malik told his friend everything that had happened that night, not withholding details. He trusted Leroy, knew he wouldn't go to the police with this information. And you didn't tell the police it was DeAndre? Leroy asked when Malik had finished his story. No, why not? Malik looked away, looking out the window at the cloudless blue sky beyond. Because I want to deal with it myself. Leroy shook his head. Malik, this is crazy. Let the police do their job. They'll find them both. And the law... The law? Malik interrupted him. What law, Leroy? The one that always works against people like us? Do you really think justice will prevail? Is she going to get a couple years for assault and then get out like nothing happened? What about me? What do I get besides scars and a ruined life? Leroy looked at his friend carefully. You're up to something and I don't like it. Malik didn't answer, and Leroy continued. Look, I understand your feelings. If I were you, I would be furious too. But don't do anything stupid. Think about the consequences. All I do is think about the consequences, Malik said quietly. All my life, I've done nothing but think about them, about what will happen if I say what I think, if I do what I want, if I go out of order. And where has that gotten me? To this hospital bed, with 8 holes in my body that my own wife made. Leroy sighed, not knowing what to say. You're my friend, Malik. I don't want to see you ruin your life. My life has already been ruined, Malik replied. Now I just want justice. My justice. They sat in silence for a while, each absorbed in his own thoughts. Then Leroy got up. I must go. Laisha sends her regards and wishes you a speedy recovery. Is there anything we can do for you? Maybe bring some food or clothes? Malik shook his head. No, thank you. There's everything here. Just, don't tell anyone about our conversation, okay? Leroy looked at his friend for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but promise me you'll call me before you do something you might regret. I promise, Malik lied. When Leroy left, Malik closed his eyes but stayed awake. A plan was forming in his head. He knew where to find DeAndre, and he was almost certain that he would find Kimberly there too. But first, he had to get out of the hospital. The days in the hospital stretched slowly. Malik was slowly regaining his strength. His wounds were healing, though the doctors said it would take a long time to make a full recovery. Detectives Holloway and Tuller visited him twice more, asking about Kimberly, but Malik stuck to his story. He knew nothing. By the end of the 3rd week, the doctors allowed Malik short walks in the hallway. He used this time to regain muscle tone, despite the pain that still accompanied every movement. There was a nurse in his room who helped him with his exercises. You're recovering faster than we expected, Mr. Johnson, she remarked one day as she helped him sit up after a particularly difficult exercise. I'm well motivated, Malik replied. Oh yeah, you're a construction worker, right? Would you like to get back to work soon? Malik nodded, not correcting her mistake. His motivation was different, but he wasn't going to talk about it. On one of those days, Leroy visited him again. He brought a homemade meal prepared by Laisha and fresh fruit. They talked about various things, avoiding the subject of Kimberly and DeAndre. Leroy talked about work, about the foreman constantly asking about Malik and holding his place. When do you get discharged? Leroy asked when the conversation dried up. The doctors say in a week, maybe sooner, Malik replied. It depends on how the recovery goes. Leroy was silent for a moment, then asked softly, Are you still thinking about what we talked about? Malik didn't pretend not to understand what he was talking about. Yes, Malik. Don't, Leroy, this is my case and I'll decide it in my own way. Leroy shook his head. I can't talk you out of it? No. Then at least be careful. I don't want to visit you in prison, Malik grinned. You won't have to. I'll think it over. When Leroy left, Malik returned to his thoughts. The plan was simple. Find DeAndre and Kimberly, make them pay for what they'd done. He would work out the details later, when he was out of the hospital and able to act. The detectives came again, and this time their questions were more insistent. They asked about his relationship with Kimberly, the problems in his marriage, whether they were having financial difficulties. Malik answered carefully, trying not to give away his true feelings for his wife. We still can't find your wife, Mr. Johnson, Holloway said. This is unusual. Usually in cases like this, a person either goes to relatives or tries to leave the state, and we keep track of that. But Mrs. Johnson seems to have vanished. Maybe she left the country, Malik suggested. She has a cousin in Canada. That was another lie. Kimberly had no out-of-state relatives as far as Malik knew. We'll check, Holloway nodded. Can you give us the cousin's contact information? Unfortunately, no. Kimberly didn't talk about her much, and I don't even know her name. All I know is that she lives somewhere near Toronto. Holloway made a note in his notebook. Okay, but if you remember anything, or if she contacts you, call me immediately. A month after the attack, Malik was released from the hospital. The doctors gave him strict instructions. No exercise, regular medication, weekly follow-up visits. Malik listened, nodded, but had his own thoughts. Leroy came to pick him up from the hospital. In the parking lot, he helped Malik into the car, gently supporting him under his arm. "Where should I take you?" Leroy asked, starting the engine. "To our place?" Laisha had prepared the guest room. Malik shook his head. "No, home. I have to go home." Leroy looked at his friend with concern. "Are you sure? There will be a lot of memories. That's why I have to go back." The drive home was silent. Malik looked out the window at the streets of Muscatine, at the people going about their business, and thought about how alien this world had become to him. It was as if he were looking at everything through a thick pane of glass that separated him from normal life. Leroy pulled up in front of Malik's house. The modest one-story house looked exactly the same as it had a month ago, except the grass on the lawn had grown back and the mailbox was full. Apparently no one had picked up the mail all this time. "I'll help you in," Leroy said, getting out of the car. Malik didn't argue. Although he felt better than he had in the hospital, he was still weak. Every movement was painful, and he tried to conserve his strength. The front door was closed. Malik pulled out his keys and they went inside. The house had the musty odor of a closed room. Dust covered every surface, and there were still dirty dishes in the sink, left over from the day before. "Why don't I stay here and help you clean up a little?" Leroy suggested, looking at the mess. "No, thank you," Malik replied. "I can manage. I need to be alone." Leroy hesitated, not wanting to leave his friend like this, but then nodded. "Okay, but promise me you'll call me if you need help, anytime, okay?" "Okay," Malik agreed, even though he knew he wouldn't call. When Leroy left, Malik walked slowly through the house, looking around the rooms. Everything was just as he remembered, and at the same time, everything had changed. Every object reminded him of the life that had ended a month ago, of the woman who had betrayed him, of the pain she had caused. In the bedroom, he paused, looking at the bed where he'd caught Kimberly with DeAndre. The sheets had never been changed, and they showed bloodstains, his blood. Rage rose up inside again, and Malik clenched his fists. He walked slowly to the bedside table and pulled out the top drawer. Among the miscellaneous knickknacks, there was a gun, an old Smith & Wesson .38 caliber that Malik had bought long ago for home defense. He hadn't used it once, hadn't even taken it out of the drawer in years. But he could use the gun now. Malik drew the gun, checked the magazine. It was full. Then he put the gun back in the drawer and closed it. Not now. First, he needed to regain his strength, recover, and prepare. He went down to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. As expected, whatever was in there had long since gone bad. Malik dumped the contents into the trash can, wrinkling his nose at the rotten smell. Then he went out onto the porch and pulled correspondence from the overflowing mailbox. Among the flyers and bills, he found several letters from the bank threatening to take the house away for non-payment of the mortgage. Malik grinned. Soon it wouldn't matter anymore. Back in the house, he dialed the phone number of the pizza place and ordered delivery, then took a shower, wrinkling his nose every time the water hit the scars from the stab wounds. 8 scars, 8 reminders of betrayal. After changing into clean clothes, he sat on the living room couch and turned on the television. News, entertainment shows, movies, everything seemed so empty and meaningless. Life went on and he was stuck in the moment of betrayal, unable to move on without getting revenge. The pizza delivery guy rang the doorbell 40 minutes later. Malik paid and returned to the couch with the box. He ate mechanically, not tasting, thinking only of his plan. That evening, he checked the cabinets and drawers in the kitchen, looking for any trace of Kimberly's presence after that night. Nothing. Malik found nothing. No clothes, no makeup, no Kimberly's personal belongings. It was as if she had vanished from his life, taking only the essentials. This made him even more certain that DeAndre had her. Where else would she be? For the next few days, Malik spent the next few days recuperating. He strictly followed the doctor's orders, took his medication, and did light exercises. Every morning he woke up with the thought of revenge. Every night he went to sleep with it. This thought became his compass, his goal, his meaning of life. On the 5th day after his discharge from the hospital, Malik felt strong enough to take action. He took the gun out of his nightstand, cleaned it, and checked the mechanism for function. Then he left the house and got into his car. Malik knew where to find DeAndre. The bartender lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. In an apartment building that the locals called The Cage, because of the small balconies enclosed by metal bars. Malik had once given DeAndre a ride after a corporate party at the construction company where he worked part-time as a bartender. They'd even had a nice conversation then, and Malik thought DeAndre wasn't a bad guy. It was ironic. Parking a block away from DeAndre's house, Malik turned off the engine and waited. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do next, but he was sure he'd know when he saw them. Maybe just scare them off. Make Kimberly feel the same fear he'd felt when she'd plunged the knife into his body, or take it further. Time passed, and Malik sat in the car, watching the entrance to the driveway. People came and went, but neither DeAndre nor Kimberly were among them. The clock read almost 11 p.m. when Malik noticed a familiar figure approaching the house. DeAndre, in his bartender's uniform, was walking at a brisk pace, swaying slightly. Apparently he'd had a drink after his shift. Malik tensed, his heart beating faster. There he was, the man who had ruined his life. Without thinking twice, Malik got out of the car and headed toward the house. He entered the entryway a minute after DeAndre and heard him coming up the stairs. Malik followed him at a distance, trying not to make any noise. When DeAndre stopped at the door of his third-floor apartment and started looking for his keys, Malik came closer, his hand on the gun in his jacket pocket. "DeAndre," he called softly. The bartender turned around and his eyes widened in horror at the sight of Malik. "Malik, yeah, I didn't..." "Shut up," Malik ordered, pulling out his gun. "Open the door. We'll talk inside." DeAndre, pale and trembling, obeyed. His hands were shaking so violently that he struggled to get the key into the keyhole. Finally, the door opened, and Malik gestured for DeAndre to enter first. The apartment was small and unkempt. A light was on in the living room, and the sounds of a television came from the bedroom. Malik pushed DeAndre forward. "Is Kimberly here?" he asked. DeAndre nodded, his eyes darting from the gun to Malik's face and back again. "Malik, look, I understand you're angry, but..." "I said shut up," Malik repeated. "Call her." DeAndre swallowed and turned toward the bedroom. "Kim, can you come out? We have a guest." Footsteps sounded from the bedroom, and a moment later Kimberly appeared in the doorway. She was in her robe, her hair damp from the shower. She froze at the sight of Malik, her face contorted with horror. "Malik," she whispered, You should be in the hospital." "And you should be in jail," Malik answered, pointing the gun at her now. "But instead you're here with him, like nothing happened." Kimberly took a step back, bracing herself against the door jamb. "Malik, put the gun down. Let's talk." "Talk?" Malik let out a short, bitter laugh. "You stabbed me 8 times, Kimberly. 8. And left me for dead on our bedroom floor. What do you want to talk about?" "I was drunk," Kimberly began to defend herself. "I didn't know what I was doing. You threatened to kick me out of the house, and I got scared. And that's why you decided to kill me?" Malik interrupted her. "Good decision, Kimberly. Very rational." DeAndre stepped forward, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Malik, calm down. We all realize something terrible has happened. But it's not." Malik turned sharply toward him, and DeAndre stumbled. "Don't tell me what to do. You fucked my wife in my bed, in my house. And now you're hiding her here, as if you have the right to do so." "I love her," DeAndre said simply. Those words hit Malik harder than he had expected. He felt something inside him break, the last vestiges of humanity that still remained in him after everything that had happened. "Do you love me?" he asked again. "And for how long?" DeAndre and Kimberly looked at each other, and in that look, Malik read everything he needed to know. "A long time, huh? How long, Kimberly? How long have you been deceiving me?" Kimberly lowered her eyes. 6 months, she answered quietly. Malik shook his head. 6 months. And all that time you looked me in the eye, told me you loved me, demanded the money I'd worked hard to earn. "Malik," Kimberly began, taking a step toward him. "I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Our marriage died a long time ago, you know that." "Then you should have just left," Malik said. "Pack your things and leave. But you chose the knife." He raised the gun and Kimberly froze. "Malik, don't. Think about what you're doing. If you kill us, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." "I'm already in prison," Malik replied. "Imprisoned by my ruined life, my trampled dignity, and all because of you." DeAndre suddenly lunged forward, trying to knock the gun out of Malik's hand. They clashed, struggling for weapons. Kimberly shouted for them to stop. For a moment, Malik felt the pain from his wounds flare up with renewed vigor, and it gave him resolve. He pushed DeAndre away and, without thinking, fired a shot. The sound of the shot was deafening in the small apartment. DeAndre yelped, clutched his chest, and slowly settled to the floor. Kimberly screamed and rushed over to him. Malik stood looking at them as if from the outside, as if none of this was happening to him. Kimberly raised her head, her face contorted with hatred. "You killed him! You killed DeAndre!" Malik shifted the gun to her. "You left me for dead, Kimberly. Why should I do otherwise?" She straightened up, looking him straight in the eye. "Go ahead, shoot, if you have the guts." Malik stared at the woman he had once loved more than anything in the world. Now she seemed alien to him, ruthless, cold. He remembered her smile on their wedding day, remembered her laughter as they moved into their new home, remembered her warmth beside him at night. All of that had died, turned to ash under the bitterness of betrayal. He pulled the trigger. The second shot sounded as loud as the first. Kimberly flinched, her eyes widened with shock, and she collapsed next to DeAndre. Malik lowered the gun. He didn't feel what he wanted. No relief, no satisfaction, no remorse. Only emptiness, endless, cold emptiness. He turned and walked out of the apartment, down the stairs, out into the street. The night air was cool. The stars shone brightly in the clear sky. Malik got into his car, started the engine, and drove out of the parking lot. He knew he couldn't go home. That's where they would look for him first. He steered the car toward the exit of the city, toward the interstate highway that would take him far away from Muscatine, from Iowa, from his old life. The road spread out before him, dark and deserted. Malik turned on the radio, trying to drown out the silence inside him. The song that was playing was about lost love and heartbreak. Malik grinned at the irony and put on the gas. He didn't know where he was going, only knew that the past was gone and the future was dark and uncertain. All he had left was the road and the determination to get as far away as possible from the place where he had lost everything.